Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only discuss things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, mechanics, etc. is out unless it relates directly to how the story is being told. I'm Daniel Radford, author, morally ambiguous antique salesman, and also your host. And today I'm joined by my usual partner in crime, John Kernan, as we continue our not at all controversial cycle on politics.
Hi, I'm a spark. Nailed it.
Nailed it. 10 out of 10. Well, for once, that didn't give away completely what we're doing for anyone who hasn't read the title of the episode for some reason. So today we are actually talking about Andor. That's right, we're doing another Star Wars episode, baby. Let's go.
You can't stop us. Star Wars is all things to different people.
Us do a season without at least mentioning Star Wars? Haha, no.
Not not unless you can find me a topic that literally can't be worked into Star Wars at all.
Get good luck. However, we have a very specific topic to go into this time, hence the choice of Andor over, say, fucking, I don't know. I don't know. I just like tried to mix like six titles all together. What I was actually going for was The Force Awakens. So, brief rehash before we get into Andor, right? Actually, no, let's start with a summary of what Andor is, because that's how we typically do this. I'm really on the ball this episode, apparently. Let's go.
Oh yeah. Eyes on the prize.
Andor is technically actually a prequel to the Star Wars movie Rogue
A
One,
prequel to a prequel.
which is a prequel to the original trilogy, but not to the prequel trilogy, which is set quite a ways before it.
Yeah. Although it is also definitely a prequel. The original trilogy is definitely a prequel to. Oh no, never mind. Never mind.
Well, you can't call it a prequel because it came first. So
I can't
everything
call
else
it a
is either a
prequel
prequel to it
because
or a
it's
sequel.
too smack dab in the middle. I can I almost wanted slightly to call it a prequel in only that like it's not a prequel, but it's somehow the first thing and a sequel at the same time because before the prequels ever got made, they were already being called episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, I don't. It's a mess. Star Wars chronology is always fun to piece together.
George, George Lucas was like, "What if I started a story in the middle?" And somebody was like, "You mean in media res?" And he was like,
Kind
"What's
of, I
that?"
guess.
He's like, "In media what?"
But yeah, Andor is a really interesting piece of media. It holds a very interesting place in the Star Wars canon. It is so much more ground level and in the lives of the characters than pretty much any other piece of Star Wars media. It's not really dealing with Jedi or Sith or Wills or the Bendu or any of this other crazy Force shit. There's no, Night Sisters involved. It is ground level, grassroots at first, dealing with life in the Empire.
Yeah, this is as like bog standard, like eyes on the ground lives of the people as Star Wars pretty much ever gets.
And specifically, of course, we primarily follow Cassian Andor, who is one of the main characters in Rogue One. And it sort of chronicles how he goes from not like Jin in Rogue One, who was like very apolitical, I'm just not getting involved. He was always fuck the Empire, but he was also never really going large scale. It was all very petty revenge.
He was trying to be selfish and look out for himself, and what he did, he was just doing more to pinch the nose of the Empire than to make a difference or a statement.
Yeah. And it follows him from that sort of starting place to becoming the man we know from Rogue One, who is all in, 100% rebel, 100% like live and die as a rebel, fight the Empire, free the galaxy, to the point where he is serving as an almost mentor figure in a way. Not really a mentor in the sense of competency, but in showing Jin why she's got to be involved, why she's in the fight, whether she wants to be or not, and helping her become a part of that. He's not the only factor in that, but he definitely plays a part in that.
I really like the way they present it like that too, because he's he's trying so hard not to get involved with anything bigger at first. It could be easy to just be like, oh yeah, no, he's just a selfish guy who hates the Empire. And selfish at first, definitely a fair bit. But it's like also the that spark was always there in him, and not because he's naturally rebellious or hard to control or anything like that. It's that as petty as what he was doing to the Empire was, when you're being petty and spiting an empire, like just a faction, a group of that size that's that totalitarian and exerts that much control and threat over everybody, even that bit of spiteful acts might as well be rebellion with the way you are poking the bear.
Yeah, with him, it was never like keep your head down, don't get involved. It was more he did not see a world in which that a true rebellion was an option. It was all about that petty spite because in his mind, that's all that there was. It's through meeting Luthen and Mon Mothma and getting involved in that bigger picture rebellion that he begins to fully commit to the idea of a true uprising and seeing a world where the Empire is no longer a threat.
Not even Mon Mothma, Vex, her
Vel,
cousin or
yes, her
niece?
cousin. He does meet Mon Mothma later in
Oh, that's
season
right.
two.
Oh, fair enough.
But yeah, it's Vel you're thinking of, and her whole crew on Eldani and all that. Of course, we do see other things as well, other sides of that, and there's a lot to get into it, and it's fittingly very, very political.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and you can tell that showing like the politics of it is a very explicit goal with Andor, purely by virtue of how often we switch perspectives to other people besides the guy whose name is the show.
It's both it is both political in and out of universe. We talked a bit about that last episode, how you can't really not be both. But
Hmm.
sorry if I keep getting if my voice has sounded a bit funny for a couple moments there. By the way, I my nose is crazy itchy for some reason. I keep scratching my nose, and every time I do, I like partially block it, so I sound funny. But
That's
as I
okay. My
was,
nose is still fucked up from being sick a week ago.
yeah, as I was trying to say. So it is obviously it's both, as we talked about, but it is very intentionally both. It is both a commentary on totalitarian fascist systems of power and rebellion, as well as just in universe being a very real glimpse at the inner workings and politics of the rebellion and of the empire, how they both function and work. So, you know. This is one of the things I think that made a lot of people go, "Oh, stop making Star Wars political." That and they did have a female protagonist for a bunch of things.
How
But
dare.
how dare they? But as we said and made a big point of last episode, Star Wars has always been political. The OT is about a rebel faction overthrowing an empire. The prequels are about the fall of democracy. The Clone Wars are a civil war. Rebels is about that rebellion we just mentioned. Even The Mandalorian deals with the politics of the Mandalorian culture a bit. So Shut up, no complaining.
And for anybody who thinks the Mandalorians aren't that political, just so you know, and an entire thing you're never going to see in the show or the movies, they almost conquered the entire galaxy, not once, but twice. So,
And largely failed because of A, the Jedi, and B, infighting.
yeah. So politics matter quite a bit to them too.
That being said, Andor is, as we said, very political because this is all about that ground level life under the authoritarian fascist regime, the inner workings of that system, and what it takes to bring that system down. And more than going than just bitching for an hour about people who don't understand the media. It's discussing those things that we're really here for today. Although we may well devolve into bitching about people who don't understand media. It's possible.
It's easy to do when it comes to political stuff because media is often trying to muddy the political waters, but politics always muddy the media waters just by existing.
Yeah. That being said, this is very intentionally political commentary, and anyone who thinks otherwise is willfully ignorant.
And I gotta say, Andor is saying a lot, but I feel like the baseline most important like statement I got from it beside even like beneath and besides like the simple idea of a spark of something like rebellion is that's I think totalitarian like systems like this, it's not a matter of if there's a rebellion or even if they fall. It's just a matter of when, simply by being what they are, they create a timer before they're toppled, where all they are doing is trying to extend that timer a little bit longer because inevitably, no matter what, you will spark like enough force against you by continuing to try to completely control people because you can't, and people hate that just intrinsically as a part of being alive and sapient and having thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lovely side effects we get as a result of seeing the inner workings of the Empire in greater detail than basically ever before, as well as how the first sparks of the rebellion are really starting to form, is that we get an understanding of that the Empire, like all empires, was doomed from the beginning. Empires always fall to the point that there is a framework laid out in by a political scientist of some sort. I can't remember exactly who it was. There's like seven stages of it, which deal with like the fall of empires and things like that that are very interesting. That you can basically slot every empire that has ever existed into that framework and track their path to falling. And you could apply that to this fictional empire as well. But some of the main ones, some of the main reasons why the empire was doomed from the beginning are one, they are spreading themselves way too thin.
Yeah, the one faction, I don't care how big it tries to be, cannot control an entire galaxy. That's simply too much.
I mean, you can see it because they are employing corporate entities to
Yeah,
act
it's one
as
of the first things that we
police.
see until they're worried about Ferrix. Ferrix doesn't even technically actually have the Empire on it. It has corporate security paid by the Empire.
Yeah, the Empire have been there, but they kind of just passed through to squash some people in the past, probably shortly after they were established.
It might as well be a much more lax planet in the Imperium from Warhammer 40K. The Empire's awareness of it and care for it is, did they pay their taxes?
Yeah. Not only that as well, though, we see that a lot of the people involved in that are not even super competent.
No, it's clear that there's just too much ground to cover, and the Empire is a want for competent people, not just because of scale, but because of care and concern, where like it's the kind of care and concern you need to consistently cultivate like useful, helpful people is also kind of antithetical to the totalitarian control. It's it's one of the reasons a system like that is always doomed to fail because that requires a level of competence and complete control, especially frequently self-control, that the kind of people who want that control over others to begin with don't generally have in themselves.
No, I mean, especially when you consider that there is a sort of, I guess, human supremacist element to it as well, right?
Yeah, the Empire is definitely at least a little racist.
Like compared to pre-Empire in the Republic era, there where there was such a mix of different species involved in the power structure. Always a human majority, sure, because humans are the most numerous species in the galaxy. But there was a huge diversity that you don't see anymore in the Imperial era, and that is by design.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm not sure there is like a fictional sci-fi universe with more different alien races being around just living than Star Wars, besides maybe one where all the writer does all day is continuously write more lore and come up with new societies for their universe. You look at the Empire and there are no alien Imperial officers. They're all human,
Very few,
pretty
anyway.
much. There
There's
are
a handful,
exceptions.
but
Race traders.
they also just by virtue of doing that, they have limited the amount of people that they can have in their power structure to be a part of that executive branch, that controlling factor. They also don't really use droids in the same way as the Confederacy or the Republic did. They're very cautious about that because manufacturing the kind of droids that could be used en masse as an army is not something they want to allow people to do because it would allow people to rise up against them much more easily.
And you can't create that kind of infrastructure without at least giving people tangential access to it purely by it existing.
Yeah, it's just too risky to them.
Plus, that was probably a big part of like the decommissioning of the CIS after the Empire took over, would
Oh
be
yeah.
my guess too. They probably violently swept through those areas and took apart all those factories.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's the same sort of like having this small body trying to control such a vast amount of space and so many people is exactly it's a big factor in why real world empires, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Russian Empire, why so many of them have failed historically. A big part of that is because they are trying to, with one centralized area, one centralized seat of power, control massive swaths of land that they have so no eyes on. And speaking of overreach, overspending is also a big part of why the empire is doomed, why all empires are doomed, because they are spending shitloads of money on vanity projects and attempts to showcase visibly how powerful they are because the appearance of power, of being insurmountable, is integral to the survival of a totalitarian regime.
Yeah, and you can only tax people so much before they're either going to fight back or die, and either way, you lose them as a revenue source.
Exactly. Like the biggest, best example of this, biggest quite literally in a lot of ways, although certain other media has proven that they had other larger projects in the works too. But the big one that comes to mind is the Death Star itself.
The Death Star might be the biggest government waste of money ever.
It's even said as much in different like aspects of the franchise itself. Like think about it. It's this massive, massive, unnecessarily powerful weapon. You don't need to be able to vaporize a planet. Even the single reactor we see used in Rogue One is enough to be an extinction level event.
Yeah. And besides that, like how many planets can you do that to? That's not a card you can keep pulling out of your hat to get people to fall in line. Especially because every time you use it even once, you are permanently making a big dent in your own like potential resources and just creating a hole in the galaxy.
Like, yeah, the threat of having your entire planet erased is definitely scary, but eventually people are going to rise up against that and fight back. And then what cards do you possibly have left to play is the other thing. So all you've done is tip your hand, erase a bunch of potential resources, and spend so much money that you did not need to spend. Like they're having so much firepower and so many people because they have to be manned and staffed and so much money sunk into just one centralized weapon is so impractical. The only reason to have it is as a show of force, as a symbol. It's a terrible use of money.
Especially when it would take so much exponentially less to kill a planet than it does to blow it up.
Exactly. And another thing as well is there's a crapload of infighting and greed and power-hungry people in the inner circles in a system like the Empire.
Yeah, because it's not a system that wants altruistic, like truly dedicated people, which is what you need to make that work.
And Andor is really good at showing us this because so much of the story centers on the ISB, on Dedra Miro and her. I can't remember all the names. There's a lot of people in the ISB.
Yeah, there's a whole little round table we get to see, but mainly Dedro, the old guy in charge that looks a little bit like our dear Grand Admiral, and
Blevins, I
the
remember
other
Blevins,
officer. There's Blevin and the other
Young, who
guy
was the
she deals
spy.
with a little bit, who's basically snubbing her.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We see that there's so much undercutting and infighting just in that little circle because they are all power hungry. They are all fighting to get more and more accolades, more and more promotions, higher and higher rank, because that's more power. And because of that, they are sabotaging each other, intentionally or not, all the time.
Yeah, and we see just how bad it is when Deidro is basically getting snubbed and almost shunned, literally just for actually trying to be good at her job. She's genuinely not trying to climb the ranks. She's like,
Well, she is.
she wants to, but she's also very seriously attached to this thing happened, some shit got stolen from me, it's bullshit, this is involved, I know it, look at all these signs I'm finding, I've got evidence, it's really obvious something is going on here, and everybody's like, huh, isn't that crazy, I've got my own shit to deal with, why are you bothering me, stay in your lane, bitch. And she's like, what? You can't say that.
She's definitely committed to doing her job well. Some of that is perfectionism, and some of that is that power hungriness.
It's just funny because it's like she's obviously a very flawed, messed up person in that anyways, and does care too much about doing well in a stupid system. But you also have to look at her and be like, damn, she's like the only one here. Everyone else isn't even doing that much.
But that's the thing, like, not only are they constantly fighting amongst themselves, but the very nature of an oppressive system, of a fascist regime like that, its very existence inspires rebellion. There's a character we meet early on named Nemec,
I love
who,
Nemec with his little manifesto.
yeah, who's like one of a young member of the like proto rebels, and he's got to be what 20s maybe.
He's definitely the youngest one there.
Yeah, he's also an idealist and a philosopher. Probably not like a trained philosopher, but he is a very intelligent, savvy, philosophical person, and he has written. He would never call this, but it's a manifesto. And he is constantly writing because he understands that one of the things that inspires people is to have the habit is writing, is education. But he lays all this out in this manifesto. All the things we've just talked about, this one character lays out to Andor through his manifesto. This idea that the empire is too big to be sustainable, that they're spending too much to be sustainable, that they are going to destroy themselves eventually anyway, quite possibly through their greed and their hunger for power. But most importantly, and as a part of that, they inspire rebellion all the time. Because anytime you oppress people, they instinctively fight back. Every little amount of insurrection, every tiny pushback shows people that you can push back and
And it's happening
encourages
all
more and
over
more.
all the time, even when we don't see it.
And I mean, he's right. He's just
He
right.
is. He's right, and I think he puts it in the exact perfect way with his idealism and his persistence to rub some of that off on Andor before they part ways. I don't think Andor would have been nearly as ready to actually commit and fall into all this without Nemec.
No, Nemec, like the things he hears from Nemec are so important to reframing how he sees the world, how he sees those little acts of rebellion. Because at first, again, it was just spite. It was just fuck you, Empire. It was never thinking that it was going to amount to anything. He never wanted to do anything too big and just get crushed because he didn't think true resistance was possible.
And he told himself the resistance he did see didn't really mean anything either. It was just people trying to get by or being petty like him.
Nemec completely reshifts that perspective and explains how all those little acts of rebellion add up and eventually make something so much bigger. And that because the Empire has no loyalty, they control people by manipulating information to influence public opinion through propaganda and most importantly through fear. Eventually, enough rebellion, the truth is going to get out. For one thing, the propaganda can't hold up forever. One, especially in a galaxy-spanning empire, eventually something they can't cover up is gonna or reframe is gonna get out. There's just too many fronts for the Empire to fight to control the flow of information. And more importantly, eventually they get people are gonna see that people are resisting, and that's going to encourage more people to resist. And the more people who resist and the more times they succeed in resisting, the less afraid of the Empire people are going to become. And when fear is your primary method of controlling people, when they no longer fear you, you cannot control them.
Yeah, it's funny what a cascading thing was, especially because it has such a nice strong impact on the original trilogy too, all the way right up to the end, because by the time Luke confronts Vader and Palpatine, it's over already. They've lost the war. It
Yeah,
wasn't going to go well or get better for them or give the Empire a chance to come back, whether Luke was even there or not by then.
the Death Stars are gone. Most of their military power has been destroyed or disrupted.
They're cornered, and even if they got off the planet, there's nowhere for them to go anymore. The whole galaxy practically has risen up against them by this point,
And that's how it goes. The the more you try to oppress people, the more they will fight back.
which is part of why I hate the First Order, but we don't need to worry about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, God, don't even. We don't have to
I
talk about
I
that today.
I I know. I don't hate that entire trilogy. I just hate the First Order.
You and me both, buddy.
First Order sucks. Anyways, that we don't have to worry about them. They're shockingly non-political, which is another thing to hate about them.
Yeah, I mean, I could try and spin it, but they're largely a departure from the political roots. Anyway, Andor. One of the other really interesting things about Andor, right, is it doesn't just show us that people are fighting back and rising up and all these little rebellions are happening. One of the really cool things about showing the birth of the rebellion and all of these different people who are rising up against the Empire in different ways is that we are seeing different ways people are fighting back. We talk about Andor because he's getting involved in it all and things like that, but he is not our only major player. Our only, like, he's not really a major player to be fair, but he's not our only perspective on things. Another character we see a lot of is Mon Mothma. And some of you may remember her from a kind of existing as a character in the original trilogy and a bit more in Rogue One and popping up every now and then in the animated series.
Not gonna lie, the main reason I remember Mon Mothma well enough for her to pop up is because her name.
Yeah, it's very
That's a
easy to
name that
remember.
always stuck in my head from the very first time I ever heard it, even though she barely existed back then.
This does a very good job of expanding on a character. Like the animated series Rebels and Clone Wars both also contribute to that, but Andor expands her character so much because we see so much more from her perspective. She is a senator.
Coincidentally, the story about politics has more to say about the politician than
Yeah, who'd have
most.
thought? You know, the Senate is basically a sham at this point, of course. It's been stacked with people who are loyal to the Emperor and mostly in it for their own self-interests and will just go along with whatever he said. Wow, that sounds familiar.
It's the funny thing is the Empire always takes cues from a lot of like classic real world empires,
Uh-huh.
and even though it's not normally the biggest one, the modern Imperial Senate really feels like the negative stereotypes you would used to see and hear about of like the Roman I don't think they had a Senate. I can't remember what it was called. But
They did. I
it's
think it was a
literally
Senate.
filled with just the Star Wars version of a fat politician laying down on one of those weird ass like hard sofas eating grapes.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking a little bit more recent, obnoxious politician stacking a governing body and various government agencies with sycophantic yes men who won't contradict him and then wrecking a nation. Hmm.
Listen, man, I don't know if the NSA is listening to me.
You better hope not after last episode.
Like, sir, we're getting reports of this house over here that's just we're hearing the words politics and rebellion a lot. Should we look into that? That sounds kind of like you don't like that, right?
You fucking drone strike on your apartment. Better watch out.
Oh no.
Right. Anyway, Mon Mothma, she's a senator in this sham senate, basically, and we get to see a lot of her trying to fight back politically, being a voice for the people who are being oppressed in the Senate and trying to turn senators onto a path, resisting the laws pushed forth by the Emperor and his sycophants. We also see some of Bail Organa doing some similar stuff as well, but not quite as much in Andor, which is kind of nice that we get more of a focus on Mon Mothma because she's a really interesting, very cool character. In addition to that,
Yeah,
though, as a side note, she is also covertly raising funds for the budding rebellion.
yeah. In fact, her family's basically barely qualifies as wealthy anymore because of it.
She is one of the strongest characters in Star Wars. I don't mean that in terms of power. She's not a force wielder, she's not a trained soldier of any kind. She's probably never even helmed a weapon. She's not even politically powerful or monetarily powerful anymore in this new regime because all of her political power has been squashed because she is a resistant figure in the Senate, and all of her financial power has been evaporated because she is feeding every spare cent she can spare without giving it away or losing her political standing. into the budding rebellion.
And pretty much the only money she has left is the bare minimum of what she needs to maintain her place in society, because if her family became poor, she would lose everything else.
Yeah, what I mean by strong is emotional strength and strength of character, because I think out of everyone we see, she is one of the people who is in the most danger all of the time.
And sacrificing all of the time.
Yeah, she is constantly giving more and more of herself, of her life, to resisting the oppression of the Empire, both in the Senate, because it's not just a front for her, she is actively doing her job as a senator and doing it well in the face of all that adversity, keeping that smile on her face and standing tall in the face of all that, whilst also doing all this covert fundraising and connection building in the background.
And you know she's got to be doing a good job at it too, because multiple of the other senators, despite not really giving a shit about her struggles or what she has to say, at the very least still like her and want to go to her parties. Which is saying a lot considering how directly against what they believe in and what they profit from she is.
You know, she's enough of a threat that they have constantly the ISB, who is basically the NSA, and the FBI and the CIA rolled into one,
Don't drone
constantly.
strike me.
They've surreptitiously, she's very aware. They've replaced her driver with a spy who's constantly watching her because she could be a problem, but they don't want to just outright assassinate her immediately because that would be too public.
Yeah, she has to be that good at her job just to be alive, because if she didn't have so much going on and so wasn't so public facing and well known, they probably would have just killed her by now.
She's so important and so fascinating and so compelling as a character because we see how tired she is, how much it is taking from her to fight back against this monolithic system that she is opposed to. But she keeps doing it. She sacrifices everything. She is willing to give up all of the things that bring her comfort and joy in her life for the sake of other people.
Yeah, including still being married to a fucking loser.
Yeah, and she puts up with a loveless marriage because his social power is too important to let go of. And I'm trying to think of the nice way to say it because it's really hard to explain this without painting her in a very negative light that doesn't fully explain or do justice to the situation. But she basically lets her young daughter get into an arranged, very young marriage as a old sort of tradition that is she's been fighting against most of her life, it sounds like, because doing so is the only way she can procure enough funds to keep for the rebellion and to cover up a debt that she has incurred because of what she's been doing.
And at this point, probably, excuse me, whoa, at least partially to protect her daughter, because she already doesn't even have like the time to even really commit to properly taking care of and spending time with her daughter like she'd like to, without throwing away everything she's working
Yeah,
for.
her family's falling apart around her, and you can see all of that is breaking her heart. But she has to go through with it. She can't stop. What she's doing is too important. It's so much bigger than just her family and just her. It's bigger than just her planet.
And speaking of the planet, bonus points for showing me Imperial Coruscant, something that I didn't even realize I had never thought about.
Yeah, you see surprisingly little of it in other media.
Yeah, no, Coruscant is almost treated like it stops existing when Palpatine, or when the Empire rises, even though that's literally where it happened.
It actually shows us quite a lot of detail into other cultures, really. We see a lot of Chandrilan culture, but we see a lot of Ferrix's culture. We get a taste of the sort of corporate Morlano sector
And
stuff.
that's one of the things that's always so fun about Star Wars and exploring it, and almost kind of makes me think that Star Wars would do well with just one Star Trek-esque like pure exploration story or series, is there are so many different cultures. Every planet, sometimes multiple like cities or nations within a planet, every race on every different planet, like there's cultures upon subcultures just everywhere in Star Wars, which is another reason you can't get away from it being political.
And we spent a lot of time on Gorman in season two. It's where a lot of the shit starts really hitting the fan. But speaking of people based on Coruscant and the shit hitting the fan, Luthen.
Luthen, our wonderful wig-wearing mastermind.
One of the other ways we see people fighting back is the very dark underground way Luthen is doing this. Now he is allied with Mon Mothma. They're not separate factions. They are working together, especially in the days before the rebellion is fully formed. But Luthen is he is intelligence, assassination, terrorism, because that's what it is by definition, all rolled into one guy. He is a central figure, arguably the central figure in the early stages of building this wider network that becomes the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah, he's basically an anonymous manipulative puppet master for the good guys.
Yeah, I mean, he's also raising money in his own way through his antiques and business, basically.
Yeah, that's true. Which also lets him partially be like a money laundering fence for Mon Mothma too, because that's
Yeah,
one of the ways she can legally and visibly get rid of that money.
yeah, exactly. Because when we say antiques, as a side note, we're talking less your grandmother's old bedside table that's been in the family for three generations. We're talking like the stuff that would normally be in a museum, artifacts, things like that. Things that it's morally ambiguous in and of itself to buy and sell.
Yeah, Indiana Jones level stuff, and also occasionally, okay, and occasionally, okay, here's a treasure from a culture the Empire genocided. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Like, speaking of the Empire using genocide, how, hey, yeah, this sentient species made some really horrible, traumatic sounds when we genocided them. So
Oh
we
God,
recorded it and
yeah.
edited it to make it worse as a torture tool.
Yay.
That is one of the darkest
Specifically, they
things I've
isolated the sound the children made.
possibly at the very least top five darkest things I've ever seen and heard in Star Wars. Holy shit.
That's dark by any media standards. It was fucked.
Yeah, the guys who worked for us were horribly traumatized and all crying in the corner together after this happened. So I saw that and was like, I can use this.
But yeah, Luthen, as a side note, I would not necessarily be above turning that same method against his enemies.
He sure wouldn't. He sacrificed 31 honest people just because
Plus
it
the
was
leader.
more useful. Yeah, just because well, that's why I said 31.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But just because they were a slight information risk and also because he saw more value in the Empire getting overconfident than he did in those 31 lives.
He's prepared to let entire societies burn for the sake of fighting the Empire and giving rise to the rebellion.
His only goal is winning. He is a moral enough man to want to fight against the Empire, but other than that, he doesn't have a whole lot of scruples.
He has this really compelling, I guess technically dialogue with the guy with Young, the spy he's put in the ISB at one point, because Young wants out and Luthen is not having it. Young asks him what he's sacrificed, and he lays it out. Any chance at a future of a happy life beyond this? He is doomed. Paraphrasing, but this is pretty close to what he says. He is doomed to use his enemies' methods to defeat them. He says he has sacrificed everything there is no life for him beyond this. And he's right.
And we can see that even in season one, because besides the methods he's used, like he doesn't have an identity anymore. Luthen, the
We don't
person we
even know
know
if
as
that's his real
Luthen,
name.
is just one of his faces. He doesn't have a real identity anymore. He becomes whatever is going to get the job done.
Yeah. If history will not remember him, and if it did, it would be disgusted by the things he did for the sake of the rebellion.
And he is aware of that and he's chosen that.
And you even see that in season two, because in season two we see that there are the early stages of the actual rebellion, and we see that as the rebellion grows and becomes more quotation marks legitimate, they distance themselves more and more from Luthen and like him less and less. And it's
Yeah, he even
tragic.
gets an eyebrow raised from Saw Gerrera, and Saw's kind of crazy in his own way.
Sora is literally an extremist, yeah.
Saw is a violent terrorist extremist, which is so funny because the first times we ever hear about him in other media, he's almost purely talked about as like a hero of the rebellion. And then we get other media later where you start seeing him or meeting him, and it's like, oh, I see. He is the fire. What's the word? Firebrand. He's the first, the biggest firebrand of the rebellion. He's very much a soldier, but he's also one of the few rebels you see who's like, yeah, no, he is also a terrorist. You can't say he's not.
Yeah. And yeah, and even he is like looks at Luthen's method and he's like, holy shit. And that but that's the thing, like a rebellion, a true rebellion, not not a peaceful protest, not an act of terror even. A true rebellion is not clean.
No, it never can be because fighting isn't clean, and there are some things that won't stop if you don't fight.
Yeah. He, and Luthen embodies that more than anyone. He he takes on so much of all of that, all the dirt, all the stuff that happens in the dark, the stuff that history doesn't want to talk about because they don't want to think of the good guys doing these things. He does all of that and he would do more. He will do whatever it takes and sacrifice anything or anyone for the sake of bringing the empire down and bringing true freedom and happiness back to the people. He is someone
Yeah.
whose actions are about as immoral or certainly morally ambiguous as it gets, but who's so deeply invested in the righteous cause. He's a fascinating character.
Yeah, he's really interesting. Stopping the empire is his moral imperative, and that is more important than any one person. And there's nothing you can do to change somebody like that who's really that committed because no matter how much you disagree with his methods or whatever, no matter what you say to him, he could turn around and tell you with genuine bracketed examples he probably has in a binder in his robes right now how many more people already have died and will continue to die and be tortured than whatever he's sacrificing if the empire's not stopped.
And we see less of this, but of course we also do see snippets of the growing rebellion as a military faction as well. They're not very prominent because Andor's not about the long drawn out war. It's about the birth of the rebellion more than anything and about the lead up into Rogue One in season two, especially. But we do see them growing as again, legitimate military faction. The true rebel alliance as well, in addition to the covert stuff, in addition to the political stuff. And that's sort of about three main ways we see people fighting back, other than just ground level resistance, like what we see in Ferrix in season one. ordinary people, not soldiers, not spies, not politicians, ordinary people gathering together and resisting and saying, no, we are not going to be part of this. We are going to fight back one way or another.
And let's not forget the prison. An entire riot and prison break that happened purely and only because the Empire played their hand and made it obvious that nobody was actually going to be able to serve their sentence and leave.
Yeah, I mean, because that's one of the ways that fascist regimes like the Empire control people is that they will if they won't kill you, they'll certainly imprison you for nothing, for trumped up causes that they then massively inflate sentences to get more people into prison to say, look, we're rounding up the criminals because one, it projects order and security, and two, projects power yet again. But this
And it
empire
lines their
does,
pockets with slave labor.
and then they line their pockets with slave labor. And the Star Wars Empire, we see what some of those prisons look like, where they are not just arresting people on trumped up charges and inflating their sentences enormously, not just using them as slave labor. When they're releasing people, they're just cycling them into different prisons to start the process all over again.
Hey, don't worry. There's no bars on your cell. And the floor is so clean, you don't even need shoes, which is great because you're not allowed to wear shoes because the way we keep you in line is the floor will melt you.
Yeah. The whole floor is basically a giant taser that goes from incredibly painful at the first setting to you are dead at the fifth.
And You Are Dead is on at all times when everybody is supposed to be in your cells. And also, by the way, if a second person is ever in your cell, the You Are Dead setting will instantly be triggered in your cell. So, no visitors.
And
Oh
that's the thing,
man.
because the Empire doesn't view people as lives; they are resources, which is eerily similar to how Luthen handles people.
Yep.
It's just that their
He's
goals
he's
are
the most
different.
imperial, non-imperial.
Because I mean, because that's the thing, right? Andor shows us so much of what the fight takes out of you. It shows us what people have to sacrifice of themselves to make this rebellion happen. Not just the people who give their lives, but the people who give their lives in a more metaphorical sense. People like Mon Mothma who give up everything they have, who see their families and their friends fall apart around them, every relationship they have just evaporate because they are so dedicated to the cause. People like Luthen, who, despite having a righteous belief, give up every little snippet of moral fiber they have other than the cause for the sake of the cause. We see even we see Cassian even he starts the story pretty beaten down and then gets subjected to more. He is exhausted by the time season two is rolling around.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it raises some really interesting questions that a lot of Star Wars media has shied away from, right? Not only showing the toll that fighting against evil takes on people, but it raising some questions that we don't usually want to look at, or that this franchise has shied away from. How far can someone compromise their own morality to fight that evil? Who and what are acceptable sacrifices? Because those are questions that you have to ask and answer if you are genuinely forming a rebellion against a tyrannical government.
Especially because when it comes to real sacrifices, especially when you are playing around with people's lives, no sacrifice is ever a zero sum game or simple math. You can just add and subtract. One life, one victory is not worth another.
No.
There's so much to consider and so much to think about, and also so many potential ramifications that it could echo out way beyond what you were doing in the moment.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. That's why you get stuff like it's not technically part of the episode, but it would be remiss not to mention Rogue One because season two is entirely designed to build into it. But that's why you get entire the entire cast of Rogue One basically dies. Spoiler, I guess, but all of them, every main character in that movie dies.
Spoiler alert, in case how A New Hope started with Leia and her entire squad of rebels getting annihilated by Vader wasn't clear enough.
Yeah.
A lot of people died to make that happen.
And all of it is just for the sake of getting the plans to the Death Star out. Not even taking it down. It's just getting the plans that one guy left behind, hoping that the right people would find it out to be used against the Empire. It's,
Which is another great example of an act of rebellion, since we are getting one from literally the guy who built the super weapon.
yeah. It's things like early on in Andor, a number of people dying just to rob an Imperial facility. Like, we're not talking taking weapons, we're not talking about taking it straight up. They are taking money because rebellions are expensive.
Because it is so much money and they need it. And even though it's a big thing for them, it's mostly just a matter of principle to the Empire. It was only, I mean, to be fair, it's still a lot. It's like the quarterly payroll for an entire sector. But also, the Empire has a lot of sectors, and who knows how well the average Imperial soldier actually gets paid because that's just payroll. It's only because it's payroll for so many people that it's significant, and they need it. And even after months of planning and weeks of living there and setting everything up, you still lose over half the team in the process.
And it's worth it.
Heck, Gorn didn't even try to escape.
No.
Gorn went down with the metaphorical ship since he wasn't on the actual ship. It was just like, yeah, no, I'm an Imperial officer. This was never going to end well for me. I'm doing it anyways.
And that's the thing, right? Is that what we see is that the people making the rebellion happen, the reason that all of this takes such a toll on them isn't just the sacrifice, it's the stress, it's the weight of what they're carrying because they constantly have to be weighing up the value of lives, not just of individuals, but often hundreds, thousands, millions of lives. And in the end, they have to decide which ones are worth saving and which ones are can they sacrifice, all in the goal of toppling something truly evil that is oppressing so many more. A recurring thing that is often said throughout Andor, I think it comes up a bit more in season two, but it has to be worth it. They have to win. If they are going to do this, they have to commit. They have to be all in. They have to win.
Well, I mean, yeah. And that's the ultimate reason. It's not because this is the last chance, and if they don't win, then it's over. There will always be more people. There will always be more rebellion. There will always be more resistance. But personally, at a personal level, it can't have all been for nothing. It just can't.
They have all sacrificed. Like, to be clear, yes, there is the larger scale ramifications. They have to win because the Empire cannot continue to exist. That's never in question. But at a personal, individual level, these people, every single one of them, from the top tier figures like Mon Mothma and Luthen to the more middle figures like Cassian and Val, to the most
Val and
ground
Ditra, who are not only fully committed, but are staying apart and separate, even though they're a
Century.
couple,
Yeah,
just because it's more practical.
yeah, they go through hell, those two. And even the most ground level people, all of them have taken on so much stress and sacrificed so much of themselves, of the people around them, of the things they care about, that the idea of losing and all that amount, like all of that amounting to nothing, for some of them is even worse than the idea of the Empire continuing to exist.
Yeah, yeah, that'd make it feel like your entire life was pointless. What was any of it for?
It's interesting. Sacrifice has always been a core part of Star Wars. Always. But I don't think have ever seen the extent of it more than in Andor, even compared to Rogue One, where everyone gives up their lives to get those plans. I don't think any piece of Star Wars media shows the sacrifice more than Andor because it's not just lives, it's every aspect of lives and identity that these people have to give up.
Yeah, we're truly seeing all of it from every possible angle, including a couple angles that we weren't even tangentially like aware of with side eye from other properties before Andor.
And ultimately, the message there is all of those characters decide to make those sacrifices because they believe that ending the fascist tyrannical regime of the Empire, of ending the horrible things it is doing to people, is worth all that sacrifice.
Yeah.
They, everything is hinged on the belief, the hope that everything they have given up will lead to a better tomorrow. And Jesus, that is some powerful storytelling.
Yeah, it is. I I really enjoy it for that. I think it has a lot to say and it says mostly all the right things. I think it's more so than anything else, it's such a great example of the actual power of freedom and why I think as long as people continue to live like totalitarianism and control and that kind of thing can never really win. It will always exist. There will always be people who want to control others, but I think the will to freedom and to live your life and like to a lesser extent since it's less directly involved in all this even care about others is too intrinsic a part of being alive and thinking and being people and feeling for it to ever be snuffed out or truly dominated.
Yeah, it's empires always fall,
And they
always.
always will.
And they will always spread themselves too thin. They will always spend more resources than they can afford. They will always tear themselves apart from the inside. And they will always inspire people to fight back against them because too many people understand that fascism, totalitarianism, evil is wrong. And standing up to that is worth whatever you give up.
And that's why Caesar's Legion in Fallout New Vegas is really stupid.
Oh man, way to shift the mood in an instant. Fuck, man. Ah,
You know, I'm just saying, we got a bunch of Roman cosplayers being like, yeah, Rome had the right idea. Let's do that. Let's not even be inspired by it. Let's literally just do that. Again, we can figure that out, right?
I mean, just in the canon, right? Like the Empire lasts for like 15 years, 20 maybe, to be fair. 20 or so years.
Isn't it crazy to think that it's like, I think it's the shortest lived empire of all time to ever not either be really small or actually toppled in just a couple days. I think no empire that's lasted longer than a year has ever lasted that short an amount of time, especially with even a fraction of that many resources or build up. It took more time to make the empire happen than it did for it to fall.
Yeah, like if ever the message wasn't clear enough, the Republic lasted hundreds of years. And yeah, it did eventually get dismantled because of corruption and greed, all those same things that were weaknesses in the Empire. But it took hundreds of years to get to that point. The Empire started from that point and then got worse, and it fell in 20-ish years.
It's yeah, it's It's pretty bad when you think about it. And I think that's another example of why it was always doomed to fall because, funny enough, the founding of the empire and its initial spread, at the very least, is hyper competent. And it still fell apart that fast and was that doomed. Like, in only 20 years, they got to the point where people were so thoroughly indoctrinated that there were a lot of people stupidly believing that uh that the empire was right or that there was no hope of fighting it, as if it has always been this way when it has not even been an entire actual generation. And yet they were still that thoroughly doomed to fail.
And Andor just does a really good job of laying out all the reasons why that is the case. I mean, they in Nemec's manifesto, which you hear in like episode 3 or 4, I think, spells out the entire beginning and then trajectory of the Empire to why it's doomed to fail.
Yeah, and I his yeah, that's part of why his manifesto is one of my favorite things about the whole show.
Yeah.
Because you can just take that right out of the show and put it in real life.
And compare it to certain things happening in the world historically and
Hmm.
also in the present. Honestly, if you want another, like, if you want a really good analysis of why Andor is so good and what it is saying politically, I highly recommend. I'm pretty sure it's Nando V the movies has a video about it. It's something about Andor being a like anti-fascist masterpiece, which is sums up quite nicely for what it is. But it's also just a really good video. Highly recommend. I think that's who it was. It could have been any number of other video essayists I watched, but I think it was Nando.
Probably.
For now, though, I think we can leave that one there. Like, we could, again, this is another one of those things that we could talk about for ages, especially if we started branching off into like how this relates to all the other parts of this extremely large, complicated universe. But we don't want to have our time exceed what it typically fits into. We don't need an 8 hour episode. So, if you guys enjoyed this and are listening to this on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcast, Podbean, anything like that, you can also find these episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com. You can also find my stories that I write there, poems I write there, blog and article posts. You can buy my books there, and you can, of course, find all of my collaborative work I do with John there as well. And you can find him streaming on Twitch and YouTube as Sephir, Sephear.
That's me. Uh, Always rebelling against the man. Remember, I'm the spark. Hashtag the spark.
And it would have had a different vibe if "stick it to the man" was the catchphrase, not not the spot. All right, we're done here. Goodbye.